All right, 1 second here. All right, welcome everyone. We're holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 15. Again, I want to welcome everyone. We are holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 15. We are in verse 15. Again, Chapter 15, Book of Leviticus Chapter 15. Sorry, verse 15. We're speaking about counting days that a Zav is impure. We spoke about a 7-day period. Spoke about the mikvah, or a stream, or a spring, as it was known, right? In order that the person, gets the purity. So we are now again, chapter 15, verse 15, where Torah tells me, so here the Torah says that the Kohen is going to make. What is he going to do? He's going to make a sin offering. He's going to make an oil offering, a burnt offering. So the Kohen is going to give him atonement before Hashem for his discharge. Now, what do we see? He's going to bring offerings, right? He's going to bring a sin offering. Obviously, he did something wrong, right? That there's no question. He's going to bring an oil offering. Remember, an oil offering is for somebody who it's atonement for bad thoughts. Basically, for bad thoughts, burnt offering, no one eats it, gets totally burnt up. So the Torah tells me the Kohen is going to make these offerings, right? For this person that had this, discharge. Now, it says Torah further, verse 16, V'ish ki teitze mimenu shichva zara, v'rachot b'mayim, eskol b'saro tami ala ha'aretz. Now here the Torah tells me, talking about a seminal emission for a guy, it says a man who has an emission of semen shall immerse his entire flesh in the water and remain pure until evening. Now it's interesting over here. What does it tell me? It tells me his whole body has to go in the water. Now, before that, Torah doesn't use that language. It'll say immerse himself in the water, immerse his garments in the water, immerse himself in the water again. Verse 10, verse 12. Right, but it doesn't say his whole body. We have to see why over here by a man who has a emission of semen over here, he's gonna immerse himself. Right? He's gonna immerse his entire flesh. So there's an obvious question. In all the verses, seemingly it just says, that we mentioned. What does it tell me? He'll immerse himself in the water. He'll immerse his garments. He'll immerse himself. Right? I mentioned a number of times that he'll immerse himself. Now, don't I understand? Wouldn't I understand from that the entire body? Right? If you immerse yourself, right? You go to the mikveh, you go to the ocean, you go to a, what do you call it? Not a stream. What's the word I'm thinking of? A spring. He's going to go to a spring. He's going to go to some body of water, right? To become pure over here. Now, whatever it is, all the other verses tell me that he's going to immerse, but it doesn't say his whole body. Now, I do understand it has to be a certain amount, right? We saw last week, right? It's got to be 40 saw or 500 something liters or gallons, whatever it was, 454 gallons or something like that, right? That's the minimal. That's the minimal it has to be. And if it's less than that, person immerses could immerse 100 times. Could immerse 1,000 times. Doesn't matter. You're not going to be pure over here. Or she's not going to be pure over here. But there's an obvious question. Why does it say his entire body? Right? Well, I have to see. Because every other time by a zav, right, by impurity, by this discharge, right, it only says the body. Sorry, it doesn't say the entire flesh. It just says he'll immerse himself in the water. Right? That's what it says a number of times. What does it say over here? It says he'll immerse his entire flesh. Right? Seems like a definite problem over here. Right? Because it's the only place that it says it. Comes along. One second. So here, one of the commentaries mentions that you don't need a mikveh over here. Right? You don't need a mikveh. You can have running water. You have running water per se. You don't necessarily need a mikveh over here. But it's something, maybe that's what I would think. But by a zav, right, but someone who has this discharge, right, it says it's going to be maim chaim, live water. What does live water mean? In the vernacular, it means, rabbinic literature, it means the mikveh. Right, that's what it means. That's, I would think, okay, if it's talking about a zav, and a zav needs to go to a mikveh, maybe by anyone else. Anyone else becomes impure, doesn't have to go to the mikveh. Right, maybe I'll say that. But he says over here, no, it says the fact that it says in water, it means special water, i.e. a mikveh. So too can be, obviously where's the water going to come from? It's going to come from rainwater, right? We spoke about that. Mentioned that last week. Now comes on the Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra says it's an interesting thing over here. What does the Torah tell me? It says, Ki teitze mimenu shichva zara. The translated here is a man whom there is an emission of semen. Ki teitze. The word teitze means to go out. Right? It goes out from him. So it comes along the Ibn Ezra and he makes an inference over here. And he says that it doesn't say ki yotzi. What's the difference? The word yotzi over here is hefil. Right? I give a nice grammar explanation for everyone who's either late at night or early in the morning, whatever it is. Right? That's yotzi over here is the same roots as teitze. What's the root of the word? Yud Sadi Aleph. Means to go out. Means to leave, to go out. So the Ibn Ezra here says, okay, I got an inference. The Torah tells me, Ki teitze mimenu. Ki teitze mimenu. Here we translate it as an emission. There's an emission from it. Right? A man from whom there is an emission of sin. But it doesn't use the other language, yotzi. The word yotzi means it's causative. Right here means it's active. It's an active form of the verb. If it's an active form of the verb, right, what would I would think? Right? It's active. Did it to himself. Right? Did it willingly? It's action. Right? If I use the other words, ki yotzi, it means causative. But what does Ibn Ezra say? Ibn Ezra says that he has this emission, it goes out from him. So says the Ibn Ezra, Shelo b'ritzono. What does it mean, Shelo b'ritzono? Not of his own free will. Right? He didn't do something actively, per se. Right? It happened. Right? Maybe, he ate too much garlic. Sometimes that does it. Other things could do it, but it's he says over here, he didn't do it on purpose. Right? So how do I know? How do I know, says Ibn Ezra? One of the commentators on the Ezra says that the Torah did not say ki yotzi. Right? That it went out causative. Right? It sounds more active. Not that he didn't do anything. Right? So here, he's still liable. He's still liable over here. Why is he still liable? He's liable even if he didn't do it willfully. It happened. Whatever reason it happened. Right? Whatever reason it happened, it wasn't on purpose. If it's on purpose, much more serious. Right? A much more serious thing. But over here, he didn't do it on purpose. Right? First thing the Ibn Ezra said. So he says, it appears to me, you got to wash his clothing or his skin. And it doesn't matter whether this discharge is, again, we'll keep this clean there, whether it's dry, whether it's wet, still got to go. Still got to go to the mikvah. Still got to immerse his body. So he says, so the whole question over here that we're going to see in verse 18. I don't know if we'll get there today. But in verse 18, it says, a woman whom a man shall have carnal relations shall immerse in the water, and they remain impure until evening. Now, that's willingly, right? That's when it's permissible. But even so, certain level of impurity, which really doesn't apply today, but I don't think we're going to get there. So I'll talk about before that. But regardless, the Ibn Ezra says, so that's by a male. That's by a male over here. What about later? What about verse 18? Right, it's talking about a woman, right? She has carnal relations. This is what happens. There's impurity. Purity, whatever it is. Right? There's a certain level of purity. It might be not a high level of impurity here. Right? But seemingly they'd have to go to the mikveh afterwards. Now, we're not really going to get into it because I don't think we're going to get into it because a lot more to talk about here. But in any case, says the Ibn Ezra, right? Let's make clear. The Ibn Ezra says, not on purpose. He didn't do it on purpose. Nonetheless, doesn't matter. There's a reality. The reality is, he's impure. Right? He's got to immerse his entire body. Whether the discharge, wet, dry, whatever, he's got to immerse. He's got to clean himself off. He's got to immerse. But it didn't happen on purpose. So you'd say, and if it happened on purpose, yeah, it'd be worse. Because he caused it. Here, it's something that happened. Right? It wasn't necessarily his fault. I mean, in the end, it happened. So there's a certain level of impurity. Good. But if there's a certain level of impurity, they're going to wash his entire body. Right? But again, the Ibn Ezra here states clear, talking about he did it by accident, not on purpose. But again, whether it happened, if it happened on purpose, I understand it's a lot more severe. And if it happened by accident, right, it's also impurity. We don't say just because it happened, he wasn't thinking, or maybe, whatever. However it happened, doesn't really matter. Right? The point is, he didn't do it on purpose. So you say he didn't do it on purpose. So why are we going to throw the book at him? Because he did it. In the end, he did it. He transgressed. Right? You got to be more careful. Transgressed over here. We don't care what his intention was. Someone who transgresses something by accident, what do I care why he did it? He wasn't thinking. You're right. He wasn't paying attention. You're right. But still, he's going to bring a sacrifice. We're not going to throw the book at him. Because he didn't do it on purpose. Mentioned last night in my class in Perkei Avot. The Rambam says in the laws of repentance. The Rambam says at the very beginning, first chapter, if a person does something on purpose or by accident, he transgresses, he's got to say vidui. He's got to confess. Now, what's the obvious question? Obvious question is the Rambam says even if he did it by accident. What do you mean he did it by accident? Why does he have to confess? You can tell me he wasn't careful. You can tell me standing up against the wall, it's on Shabbos, didn't realize there's a light switch, turned it on, turned it off. He wasn't careful, okay? But he wasn't careful. But why does he have to confess? Why is it a higher level of repentance there? He didn't do it on purpose. He had no intention over here. None. It happened. Right? Doesn't mean it's not liable. Right? It's certainly not as liable if he did it on purpose. He didn't care. That's a whole different thing. Then he gets a death penalty if he was warned and they got the right category, of Shabbos, and he gets spiritually cut off. Right? Two things going on over here. He gets spiritually cut off and he gets a death penalty. Right? That's pretty bad. Pretty bad in both cases. But here he didn't do it on purpose. Right? It says more for heavy. Or if we're going to so much sleep, there should be well. It's commentary on the law of the repentance by the Rambam. And he brings down the Vilna Gaon. And the Vilna Gaon says Rav Elijah Vilna. He asks the question, what's going on over here? He did it by accident. If he does it by accident, why is he liable? Why does he have to I understand why he's liable, but why does he have to confess? He did it by accident. He didn't do it on purpose. I wasn't paying attention, should have been more careful, you're right. But he did it by accident. Comes along, the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon says, you know what? You know what the issue over here is? Brings the verse from Mishnah. Brings the verse from Proverbs. Everybody brings the verse over there. And what does he say? He learns that a person, and this is a little bit hard, but a person who does something by accident, they sin by accident. Sinning by accident, says the Vilna Gaon, only happens when you've sinned on purpose. In other words, you've done something 100% on purpose, a rebellion against God. You did it on purpose and made yourself a vessel for sin. Therefore, since you're already a vessel for sin, that means you open yourself up to sin. If you open yourself up to sin, that means I can do things by accident. I didn't have intention. I should have paid more attention. I should have done this, should have done that. You're right. But if a person never sinned intentionally, says the Vilna Gaon, then there's no possible way he's going to sin, not intentionally. So therefore, since he opened himself up, he obviously did a sin in the past, and he did a sin on purpose with intention over here. That made him a vessel. That made him a vessel to even make mistakes by doing things by accident. Otherwise, there'd be no possible way. Right? So says the Vilna Gaon. So what do we see over here? So why do I bring this up? It comes on the Ibn Ezra and says here he did it by accident. Okay, doesn't mean it's not liable. It's a lot worse if he did it on purpose. True. Heck of a lot worse. But even if we say he did it by accident, it must be he did something on purpose before. Because he opened himself up to sin, that's how he's able to do it. Otherwise, we never do anything by accident. So you tell me, what about the evil inclination? The evil inclination will come, try and trap us, this, that, yeah. They'll try and trap us to get us to do things on purpose. To get us to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, but our evil inclination overcomes us. The evil inclination doesn't come and wants to trick us this way, that way. So, okay, if I don't get you that way, I'll get you to do it by accident. Doing it by accident is a lot less. Punishment's a lot less severe. Doesn't mean you get a free pass. No free lunch. Right? Does not mean you get a free pass. Yeah, but you won't pay as great a price. Yeah, but over here, you're still going to pay a price. You should have been more careful. But if you would have opened yourself up to sin in the first place, then it never would have happened. So says the Vilna Gaon, you never do anything by accident. So therefore, comes on the Rambam. The Rambam says, so why do you have to confess? Why in the world do you have to confess over here? You did it by accident. You should have paid more attention. Should have been more careful. Very true. It's all very true. Except one thing. right? Except one thing over here. And the one thing is that why does he have to confess? If he did it by accident. If he did it by accident, he had no intention. None. You want to tell me it's so severe that part of the repentance process is even by accident, he's got to repent? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it must be, says the Vilna Gaon, it must be he did something on purpose. And if he did something on purpose, he's gonna pay, even if he did it by accident. Because if he did it by accident, I don't have to confess over here. There's repentance. There's no question. There's repentance. But who says I have to go through vidui? Right? Vidui very specific. Here I didn't have intention. Wasn't paying attention. Whatever it was. It doesn't matter. Comes along the Ibn Ezra. And the Ibn Ezra says, Shalom b'retzayin. He didn't do it on purpose. He didn't do it with his will. Or you say, well, it's against his will. All right, so now the whole question here. We're gonna see. We're gonna get very deep here in a second. Right, but he didn't do it willingly. It happens. Right, but you see, what does the Torah here tell me? Right, the Torah tells me, again, let's read the verse. A man from whom there is an emission of semen, he's got to immerse his entire flesh. In the water remain impure until evening. So we understand it happens. That's the language of the verse. It happened not willingly, but by a zav, by someone who has a discharge. What do all the verses say? He's got to immerse himself. Doesn't say his whole flesh. He's got to immerse himself. It says it a number of times. Over here it says his entire flesh. But it happened by accident. For goodness sakes, he didn't do it on purpose. Okay, you tell me it's a severe thing, I get it. But he didn't do it on purpose. You want to tell me now we're going to change the language? Torah's now going to tell me, you know what? What happened over here is the fact that he did it by accident. And now he's got to immerse his entire flesh. Entire flesh he has to immerse. Well, don't the other times he has to immerse his entire flesh? Yeah. He has to go to the mikveh, right? He has to go to a spring, whatever it is. But it doesn't use that language. It must mean over here the language much more severe. But he did it by accident. Right? 100% he did it by accident. So someone here asks, does that mean we have to be in control of our thoughts? 100%, even when you sleep. That we're going to see, going to scare the wits out of anybody, out of everybody. No one's going to want to go to sleep after this, right? After I get to what I need to get to. But of course you have to control your thoughts. You don't normally punish for your thoughts because we say, Devarim shebalev eino devarim. Words in my heart don't mean anything. Words in my mind, things I think don't necessarily mean anything except two things. Except when it comes to idolatry and when it comes to immorality. Then even if a person in their mind says, this is my God, right? Here, use my glass case, this is my God, right? The person will say, this is Bob, don't leave home without him, right? So you say, this is Bob, you think it, you don't say it out loud. According to a number of rabbinical authorities, that's forbidden, that's idolatry. I didn't say it, I didn't bow down to it. I thought it. That's enough. You tell me, words of my heart don't mean a whole lot, true. Right? Most of the time, that is definitely the case. Doesn't mean anything. But by idolatry, it does. By immorality, person thinks certain thoughts, even if he doesn't act on them, still forbidden. Right? We don't see that by many other things. See it by idolatry, see it by immorality. So now the question is, so how much do I have to be in control of my thoughts? Oh, you have to be in control of your thoughts at all times. We don't always do that, right? But the problem is, if we're not in control of our thoughts, in our minds are free from Torah, that's when sin creeps in. Right? Let that sink in. If a person's thoughts are free, they're not thinking in Torah, then thoughts can go haywire. A person, can have their mind open, not so open till the brains fall on the floor. But their mind can be open and sin can creep in. Because even if we understand a person's only going to sin, the Talmud says, if it enters in him a ruach shtus, a stupid thought, so to speak. Because the person really knows what the right thing to do is in general. And if that's the case, why would we give up our portion in the world to come, like good old Uncle Asa, for a bowl of lentils? Why would we do that? Because it's fun, because it's enjoyable. You know, we're in this world to strive, to work. So thoughts are problematic if they're not good thoughts. Right? If our mind wants to say, I'm sleeping, what's the big deal? I can dream about what I want about, even if I don't, even if I don't act on it. Someone here asked about dreams, we'll get the dreams. Right? But a person's got to be in control. Because if you don't control your thoughts can go crazy. Very easily. You don't have to be watching anything, you don't have to be listening to anything. Your mind wanders. When it's free from Torah, it wanders. Could be. Even if I yell and scream, a person's mind can wander. Could happen. I don't know how, but it could happen. But when your mind wanders, you open yourself up to sin even greater. Right? So, if we're in control of our thoughts on a constant basis, then you won't have to worry about accidental sin. Could be. Because you're always worried. You're always thinking in Torah. You don't want your mind to wander. Because if your mind wanders, you forget. You're not paying attention. You could say, but how much can I concentrate on Torah? It's hard. You're right. The brain gets tired. The Talmud says the person who learns Torah makes them weaker. Physical. Because you got to think. You got to use your brain power over here. And when you don't use your brain power, it turns to mush. Person listening to the news, other things, whatever it is, it turns to mush. Your mind wanders. You're going to say it's no big deal. I just listen to the news. Or I just read this or I read that. What's the big deal? Because it has an effect. And if it's heresy and it's Lashon Hara, it has an effect. And it seeps in. So we have to be in control. So now, someone said, what about dreaming? So are we responsible for what we dream? That could be proactive. So let's analyze what dreams are. Dreams, in general, are a manifestation of our thoughts. That's what they are. It could be a person goes to sleep, whatever they were thinking about before, what happened during the day, during the week. Maybe these thoughts come up, and that's what they think about when they dream, right? When they go to sleep. Now, a person could say, I didn't act on anything over here. I didn't do anything wrong. Dreams, 99% of the time, don't mean anything. They mean zero. There could be significant dreams that may mean something, right? But dreams only really mean something if a person's a prophet or a king. God's trying to get them a message. There are dreams that are significant. I'm not going to say not, but 99% of them, totally insignificant. They're 100% insignificant, usually. So if that's the case, and someone asks, are we responsible for what we dream? So the answer should be no. You shouldn't be responsible if it's something that's not going to be forbidden that you might act on. That's even subconsciously. If a person is thinking certain things before they go to sleep, or let's say we're thinking about it the day before, whatever, before they go to sleep, it's, I don't know, comes up in their mind. And then subconsciously they act on it. Are they going to be liable? So let's say in this case, in our case, person had an admission, wasn't his fault, wasn't proactive per se, happened when he was asleep. So you tell me when a person's asleep, you shouldn't be liable. You're not in control. The reality is, and we're going to see shortly, the reality is a lot more going on when you sleep than you think. That if a person thought certain things before they went to sleep, and then while they were sleeping, these thoughts come out, and something happens, so obviously he's affected by what he thought. There's no question. It may not necessarily be proactive per se, but at the same time, it did get acted on. Now again, person can say, I didn't mean to do it. But you're liable over here. Still have to go to the mikvah. It happened by chance over here. It didn't happen, right? As even Ezra said. It wasn't his desire. He didn't do it willingly. Well, let's ask. I mean, can't ask this person, but, let's ask the question. What was the person thinking about before they went to sleep? It doesn't just happen by osmosis. A person had to be thinking certain things during the day, whatever it was, and then they go to sleep. Now you say, maybe it's not going to come up in their dreams. Maybe. But what if it does? That's like, we're not talking when it doesn't happen. We're talking about what it does. So if it did happen, then I would venture to say it's a direct correlation. 100% a direct correlation. A person can say I never had the thought. That you can't say. It must have been there somewhere. Deep down in the subconscious. Got to be there. Because if it wasn't there, it's not part of your psyche. Mr. Ant's not going to make it part of your psyche. It can't. How's it going to make it part of your psyche? If your soul goes up when a person sleeps, how's the person going to be thinking certain things if he hadn't thought about them before? So you have to remember, whatever we see, it's recorded. It's recorded in our DNA. Now, we can fight very hard against it. We can work very hard never to think about it, but it's there. It exists. Doesn't mean I have to act on it, but it's there. I mentioned, a number of times this story, with the basketball player playing a live video game, and he made an anti-Semitic epithet. Right? He said something anti-Semitic. Right? So this non-Jewish football player, it's got a Jewish name, but, his father's Jewish, mother isn't. So, he reaches out to him, says, down in your area a lot, you come for Shabbat. Maybe we'll have chicken together. You won't be an anti-Semite. You see Jews aren't so bad. Oh, what's he going to give? Chicken, gefilte fish? Gefilte fish will scare him. Right? Scare the wits out of him. Right? So whatever. Yeah, he's going to give him chicken, potatoes, kugel. Going to have chicken soup. Oh, I love Jews. No more anti-Semitic things. Now, even this guy doesn't have a track record. Let's understand how it works according to Torah. So you say, well, this person really isn't a racist. He's not an anti-Semite. So why did he say what he said? Slip of the tongue. Oh, slip of the tongue? Really? Does Judaism believe in a slip of the tongue? No. Why doesn't Judaism believe in it? Because what a person sees makes an imprint on their soul. What they hear makes an imprint on their soul. They don't forget. They may not be able to recall it, but it's there. Right? Anyone in America, if I would sing, which I won't, but if I would sing certain jingles of a commercial that were in the 70s, right? People were alive then, whatever. All that I have to do is sing a few bars. Everyone's going to sing the rest. A person will say, I haven't thought about this thing in 40 years, in 30 years. So why is it in there? So why do you sing the words? Because it's part of your psyche. It's there. It's remembered. You may not remember. You may not remember the last time you heard it. Could have been 20 years ago. Could have been 30 years ago. Right? Could have been something else. I thought of something, I don't know, a while ago I thought of in, probably 40 years. Something like that. But why did it come up? It came up because, I don't know, we're talking about something, and one thing went to another, and then it hit this thing. I haven't thought about it in years. Years. So how did it come up? Say it came up by accident. No such thing as coming up by accident. It's there. It's wired into the person's psyche. Now, whether you want it to come out or you don't want it to come out doesn't matter, but it's there. Right? So this basketball player says something, he says something anti-Semitic, so we're going to throw the book at him. Even if he says, oh, I didn't mean to say it. Well, stupid, you were doing it in front of millions of people. You don't think you should have been a little more careful? Slip of the tongue. Now, we're going to give this guy any slack according to Torah? No. Why? Not just because he said something anti-Semitic. What if he said something against blacks? He made a racist statement against Chinese people. But the person's not a racist. No one ever heard him say anything racist. I mean, maybe he is, but let's say no one ever heard him. No one ever heard this person say anything racist. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it makes a comment against Chinese people, against Koreans, against blacks, whatever it is. So where'd it come from? Didn't come out of osmosis over here. Didn't just come out of the air. Say, oh, I can't believe I just said that. What do you mean you can't believe you just said it? You said it. So according to Torah, what does it mean they said it? It means it's part of their psyche. It means they must have thought it at one point. Now, even if you thought about it at one point, or you thought about it more or less, whatever it is, it never really disappears. Right? That's a very scary thought. It's something that doesn't disappear. Now, it doesn't mean it'll come out. Doesn't mean it'll come out per se. But what happens if a person's overtired, person's really not thinking, etc. And then boom, he blurts it out. Says, oh, my bad. No, it's more than your bad. It's not just you said something anti-Semitic over here. We're not going to hammer you just because of that. We understand it's wrong. We understand, yeah, you get fined. We're allowed to play the rest of the year, which really didn't make a difference anyway. The guy was injured, but still, is he going to get the message? Not going to get the message. Because saying something like that, why would he say it? Why in the world would he say it? It's part of it. Now he's wired that way. Doesn't mean he's going to say it every single day, every hour of every single day. He's not going to do that per se. But it's part of the psyche. It's somewhere in the subconscious. If it's somewhere in the subconscious, it can come out at any time. It can come out any time when you least expect it. When you least expect it. So a person can't say, oh, you could say, I shouldn't have said that. You could say a slip of the tongue. And a lot of times people say things and they regret what came out of their mouth. They tried to stop it, it came out. Damage is already done. So now you got to backtrack. Now you have to apologize. Oh, you have to go well beyond over here. But you can't say, gee, I'm not a racist. I never thought such a thing. I don't even know where that came from. So Rabbi Kaufman can tell you where it came from. It came from deep down in your psyche, which you said it before, or you thought it before, or you heard it before. Doesn't matter. But you got to work like a dog to get rid of it. That's why if I were to say certain jingles of certain commercials that people haven't thought about in 20 years, 30 years. I mentioned this movie last week. I couldn't remember what it was. Someone mentioned it was a Michael Douglas movie. It was a Michael Douglas movie. I couldn't remember the name, right? They told me the name. Okay, but I hadn't thought about that in years. The movie Falling Down, right? Guy just snaps one day, goes ballistic, right? Goes ballistic, all over. So I hadn't thought about that in, I can't even tell you how long. But it sort of jarred my memory because I was talking about something and mentioned this whole thing that a person snapped his liable for what he did. He's just out of his mind. He destroys, a convenience store, other things, because he totally lost it for whatever reason. He just lost it. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, wow, I wonder if I have a good example of that. And that thing came out. I hadn't thought about that in years, many, many years. But I guess garbage sticks to you like glue, right? It was a good example, right? Anyone's ever seen it knows what I'm talking about. It was a good example, right? But if I haven't thought about it in 20 years, right? More, 25 years, whatever it was, however long ago, that I saw it. So if I never thought about it since then, why did it come up then? So you say, well, it totally disappeared. Oh, no. God's showing you it totally doesn't disappear. You can have recall if you want it. Okay, I don't remember the exact name. Fine. Someone got me the name. Very good. Right? But I remember what it was. All right, probably a lot of scenes I could speak about, which I won't. But why? Yeah, I didn't see the movie more than once. But see, when you see images, this is the point. When you see images, when you hear sounds, they don't disappear. They're buried somewhere in part of your psyche. Now, the ability to recall it, that's a different issue. Right? A person can have all these things buried deep inside them, and they don't necessarily recall things. Maybe they don't have a good enough memory, whatever it is. Right? But they don't necessarily recall it, but it's there. Right? Anyone who grew up watching TV knows all these different commercials and all these lingos. Right? You hear the first 3 bars, you can sing the rest. You can tell me I haven't thought about that in 25 years. I haven't thought about that in 30 years. I haven't thought about that in 10 years. Whatever it is. So why do you remember it? Why is it there? You know why it's there? Because it's part of your psyche. Right? That's what it means over here. Right? So that was the question. Are we responsible for what we dream? In general, our dreams are just our thoughts during the day. Maybe, a person ate something spicy. That could also happen, can trigger things. But in general, it's based on your thoughts. So a person can't say, wow, this happened. I never thought about it. I never saw anything like this. Why did this happen? Because you must have. If you didn't see it, you heard about it. It made an impression on your soul. If it made an impression on your soul, guess what? It's imprinted. It's imprinted for life. Imprinted for life means you almost never, ever get rid of it. I'm not saying impossible. But once it's part of you, a person, years later, many, many years later, if it, made an impression on the soul, it's stuck there, it's there. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to recall it at all times, but that doesn't matter. If it's something that important, you remember it. If it's something not that important, you forget about it. And then when someone mentions it or triggers something, then it comes up. Then a person remembers, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, different things. Right? I had this, this ongoing joke with, with William Hall about Cobra, the movie Cobra with Sylvester Stallone. Right? There's a guy shooting up a supermarket. So he gets on a what do they call it? A CB, not even a CB. What do they call it? Loudspeaker, whatever it was. He's like, go ahead. I don't shop here anyway. He's like, go ahead, destroy the whole place. Go destroy the whole place. You're the disease and I'm the cure. Now, why would I remember that today? 20 years later, or whenever that movie was. Why in the world would I remember that now? I don't know. It's kind of funny. We have this ongoing thing. You're the disease, I'm the cure. Okay. But where'd that come from? Came from that. Now, if I didn't see it, or if I didn't hear it, then it wouldn't be there. Certainly wouldn't be there. But it's there. It's buried somewhere, but it's there. Why did it come up? Who knows? Who knows why it came up? It was pretty funny, though, at the time. I've used it a number of times. But still, that stuff to you sticks like glue. Doesn't disappear. If we fill our minds 100% with Torah, we're always thinking in Torah, these things go by the wayside. We're not even going to recollect. We shouldn't even recollect them at all. But the thing is, it's still there. Right? 100% is still there. So here someone asks, the Torah programs the mind even in sleep. So I heard great rabbis say that a person should think in Torah before they go to sleep. Why? So their thoughts of Torah thoughts. Forget about the news, forget about everything else. Think Torah thoughts before you go to sleep. Right? So the way the body works in the subconscious, it's a lot going on. Right? I'm going to get to it. It's whatever. There's a lot of deep things here. A lot of deep things here going on. Bottom line is, we waste our time with so many things. Even Torah doesn't go in. Even Torah we don't remember so well. Why not? Because that's exactly the problem. Problem is, we're doing other things. We're wasting time with other things. And it's harder for Torah to go in. Right? If we would sit there and review, and I know Torah like the back of my hand, someone asks me a question, I can answer. Let me get my snap here. I can answer like this. That's what Torah is supposed to be. That's the way Torah is supposed to be. It's supposed to know like the back of your hand. So what about everything else? Forget about everything else. It's a total waste of time. Someone in my video last night at the very end, right? You're talking about, talking about the Red Sox or whatever. So, someone today, you just wasted 2 minutes over here. You're right. 100%. Right? No, I'm not going to deny it. Very true. Right? But if I knew Torah, like I knew that stuff way back when, I would have been a Torah giant long ago. Now, that's not ego. That's just all this other time wasted. If I sit there and review and review and review and learn and just keep going and going, who knows what the potential could be? Evil Inclination have a good job after that. Just keep going. We're not machines. We're 100% not machines, but guess what? If that's the most important thing, all this other stuff is fantasy. All this other stuff doesn't matter. So why'd you mention it? Someone else mentioned it. Someone else mentioned it to me, so I answered about it. Okay. But if we're only thinking in Torah thoughts, isn't it less likely we're going to sin? Isn't it more likely our thoughts are going to become more pure? We're going to be talking in Torah, thinking in Torah. You're going to say, but I live in this world. So what? We all live in this world. What's the difference? Right? So I have to know what's going on in the world. Really? Why? A friend of mine once said, if there's a war, I'll find out about it. So you're going to say, you're going to be that, your head has to be that much in the sand. This other stuff affects us negatively. Not to mention the waste of time. So if you're a woman, you don't have these obligations to learn Torah like a guy does. That's a different issue. Question is, though, not good for them either. Because it's very easy to get into this stuff. Whether it's entertainment, whether it's sports, whether it's the news, politics, a lot of things. The world's a big distraction. A 100% big distraction. How's the person going to, how is Torah going to stick to them if they're wasting time with it? You're going to say, well, it's hard for Torah to stick. I understand. I've gotten this question a lot. How do I remember the laws of Shabbos? You got to live it. You got to work hard. That's what it is. That's what this world is. It has to be your utmost priority. You got to put food on the table. You do what it takes to put food on the table. Right? But, otherwise, what's my focus? Spirituality. King David says, I'm only here for 70 years. If I have strength, I'll be here for 80 years. Everything after that's a bonus. Right? Really, after 70 years is a bonus. So I'm going to get upstairs after 120 years. God's going to say, wow, you really had all this potential. You had such unbelievable potential. But look how much time you wasted over here. In sports and entertainment and this. Right? I mentioned a number of weeks ago, I heard a class by Pesach Krohn talking about technology. He was saying that the average person spends 4 hours on their phone, whether they're sending emails, looking at videos, other things, 4 hours a day. Now, let's say they do it 7 days a week, including Shabbos. So if you do the math, that's 28 hours. That's a day a week. That's 4 days a month. That's 48 days a year. It's 10% of your life. 10% of your life, that's what you've done. You've totally wasted time. And no benefit over here, right? If you tell me all I'm listening to is YouTube videos, good. If that's the case. Let's say a person only, did it half the time. Let's say. Still, over a lifetime. Imagine what a person could have learned. 48 days. That's a month and a half in the vernacular. More, right? It's almost 2 months. 48 days. 60% of 2 months. That's about a month and a half. A month and a half of a person's life during the year wasted. Wasted. You don't have any benefit over here. Wasted. Wasted time. Right? I'm talking about things that are waste of time that are forbidden. Who's not going to be afraid of that? And they get upstairs and God shows you that second movie according to Kabbalah. And you see that second movie, what your potential was. And God says, look at all the days, the months of your life. Kept you around until you were 80. You had 3 months during your entire life that you totally wasted. Not days, not hours, months. For most people, this is a scary proposition. Because I guarantee most people out there, most secular people, Jews or non-Jews, it's going to be years. Months is going to be generous. Whether they're on that, they're watching, they're watching movies, they're watching TV, whatever it is. It's going to be months, years. And God's going to say, yeah, you lived 80 years, 85 years. Well, I'm going to take off 4. I'm going to take off 5 years, or let's say 10%. I'm going to take off 8 years. 8 years of your life were totally wasted. 8 years. You didn't do anything. You sat there like a stupid couch potato, right? You had your couch potato right next to you, right? Watching everything. And God says, let's look at what the potential could have been. So I had no potential. What do you want from me? How much potential could I have? God shows you the second movie. That's part of what hell is. That's the embarrassment. God says, you wasted 8 years of your life and you got nothing to show, nothing. God says, I take that away from you. Those 8 years. You didn't do any mitzvahs over here. Gonzo. You sat there and wasted and vegetated your brain. Right? Anyone's read my ebook? Right? There's a famous commercial. Anyone remembers? Sure, people are going to remember in the States. And there's a frying pan, right? The frying pan on the stove, oil, etc. And someone cracks an egg, and the egg is frying. So what does the narrator say? This is your brain, right? Then he cracks the egg and he says, this is your brain on drugs. That's how I started my ebook, right? Anyone who remembers the commercial, famous commercial, right? But so if all right, we're not going to talk about drugs. So let's say a person just vegetated, and they watched all these different things. Some more permissible, less permissible, whatever. But they wasted all that time. What in the world are they going to answer? That's part of the embarrassment of what hell is. I can't even imagine how embarrassing that must be. Right? I hope I did a lot of repentance over here, because that embarrassment lasts forever unless the person gets fixed up. But here now you understand absolute truth. You see absolute truth, and now you're watching this in front of your face, and you're horrified. You're horrified. It's like, no, give me another chance. I didn't really do this. God says, what do you mean you didn't do it? I had 2 angels recording you every second of every day. You didn't tell me you didn't do this? Oh, you did it. Play the video. This is what you did. Got your hand in the cookie jar 100 times, over and over and over. Can't say you didn't do it. So that person, part of the, one good thing comes out of this is the fact that is part of the atonement. The total embarrassment is part of what hell is. You're going to suffer in other ways, right? We're all suffering in other ways, God forbid, right? But I can't imagine other punishments being as bad as this. Because here now, you're watching your life unravel. When a person dies, what's the first thing they see? Their life flashed before their eyes, right? Someone has an out-of-body experience, everybody says the same thing. Their life flashes before their eyes. Now, they see every last thing that they've done in a very rapid motion. Imagine like a film strip going 100 miles an hour, 1,000 miles an hour, chung, 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 right? All the frames. And you're sitting there like, I can't believe everyone's watching. Bad enough, you did it. But now look who's watching. Got all the angels, got the heavenly court, and they're all sitting there like this, just watching. They're like, and this guy and this soul wants to go anywhere to hide, and there's nowhere to hide. It's like, I don't know, I guess try and bring it down to this world. Imagine, everything that this person did wrong, for every little thing they get tased. Says, hey, bro, don't tase me, right? He gets tased every second. That person's going to get burned to a crisp. Ain't going to be nothing left of his soul. I mean, forget the body, right? Forget the body over here. The soul's going to get destroyed. You're going to get zapped, until it finally gets its final resting place, hopefully. And it suffers enough. But imagine what it's going to go through. And the ultimate embarrassment. So we want to nip it in the bud now. But you say, listen, I'm not perfect. Wasn't born perfect. Well, these are hard things to break. I didn't say it was easy. It's a lot more. It could be a lot more enjoyable. We just sit there, be entertained. Have our minds veg. Very easy. I don't have to do anything active. Right? But let's think about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is what? The bigger picture is, imagine what I could have been doing during that time. Imagine how much more I could have learned. So let's say, God forbids, God gives that decree. And God says, well, I let you live till 90, till 85, let's say. I'm taking 8 years out of your life. Because this is how much time you waste. 10%, 8 years, take 8 years. So God could say, you know what? I'm going to show you another picture. Imagine those 8 years. Non-stop learning what you could have done. Instead of wasting your time doing that. Then imagine exponentially how much your soul is going to grow. Then you would have other trials. Okay. But if you were to add up collectively all the things that you should have done during that time, all the learning you could have done instead of wasting time when you could have been learning. Let's say you could have been learning. I'm going to make it easy. You could have been learning. I'll even make it easier. Let's say half that amount of time you could have been learning something. So 4 hours, right? 4 years. Imagine 4 years, 365 days. Multiply that by 24. That's a pretty daunting thing, right? 365 times 4, sorry. So it's 1,460. All right, that the number's exorbitant. Imagine if that number's tripled, quadrupled. And that was the amount of time, you could have been learning. All those hours. All those days. And you get nothing. Right? 365 days times 4 is 1,460. 1,460. That's astronomical. If I had those days, if I had those days, could have learned. Imagine the merit a person could have got. You're going to say, come on, maybe you wouldn't have learned, maybe been busy doing other things. If I was busy doing other things, I'm not liable. If I could have learned and I didn't, I'm liable. If I could have done it. The numbers go up exponentially. Right? So we don't think in the short term. We don't think in the long term. We think in the short term. We're willing to give up our portion in the world to come, essentially for a bowl of lentils. Because it's fun. Because it's enjoyable. Because I'm able to rest my head and enjoy. Okay. Doesn't mean it's permissible. Right? Doesn't mean it's permissible over here. As Hashem controls everything, does he control every dream we have? Now again, most dreams are controlled by us. We're not, doesn't mean Hashem controls them. It's what, most dreams today are what we think, are what we thought during the day, during the weeks, whatever it is. Right? They come from us. He doesn't control that. And the reason he doesn't control that is because imagine a person thinking about things that are forbidden. Why would he control that? Even forbidden thoughts. If they're 100% forbidden thoughts, he doesn't want to have anything to do with that. Right? They come from us. Well, whatever. We're going to see. We're going to see where it comes from. I'm going to get there. Most dreams do, again, let's make clear. Most dreams do not have any meaning whatsoever. I'm not saying there are not meaningful dreams. There are some that are meaningful. 99% of them, not meaningful at all. Right? Totally not meaningful at all. And first of all, God does allow us to dream. That there's no question. But to have meaning, it's going to be a very, very small percentage. Very small percentage. If not almost zero. That most people are going to have meaningful dreams. I'm not saying a person won't have any meaningful dreams, right? I'm not going that far. But most dreams are insignificant. Definitely insignificant. Could a person have meaningful dreams? Yeah, it could. It's very rare. Very rare. Can evil inclination attack you when you sleep? 100%. Right? That's why a person should go to sleep thinking Torah thoughts. When you think Torah thoughts, evil inclination has less power. Doesn't mean he won't try. Certainly doesn't mean he won't try, but he'll have less power. He'll have to try and do things other ways. But if a person's really thinking in Torah, most of the time, it's very hard to get in there negative things because he's thinking Torah thoughts. Right? Totally different thing. Someone here mentions, if there's a meaningful interpretation, can you take a dream? Can we conclude that Hashem had a dream for a reason? Yeah. If let's say we had family members come back to us in a dream and tell us things, that's significant. Doesn't mean the person's hallucinating. It's significant. Right? There could be dreams that are significant. And I didn't say they're not significant. I said they're just about not. Right? The very low percentage. But could we have dreams that are significant? 100%. The ones who are going to have significant dreams are either kings, because God has to give them messages for different things, or prophets. But everybody else, most dreams are insignificant. And if God wanted to, could he make it significant? Sure. Definitely can make it significant. Right? But the majority of the time he doesn't. Right? Majority of the time we see different things. Again, based on what we think, based on, things that we've gone on in the past, they can keep recurring over and over and over, for different reasons. That doesn't mean it's not necessarily insignificant, right? But, a person can remember, let's say, they remember something positive from their childhood. If they have positive things from their childhood. They remember something positive from their childhood. It keeps, recurring. Why? Because they don't have so many positive things, going on a regular basis. So they go back to that. They go back to a time, I know people will say, when they went to camp and camp was a lot of fun, they have to deal with reality. It's, there's all kinds of fun going on, different things. So people remember that. You have dreams about that. Other things, it could be also a mechanism, of dealing with pain. It could also be a mechanism because, a person dreams. Sometimes what a person goes through is to keep going through it again and again. Like a bad Freddy Krueger movie. It's like, Nightmare on Elm Street. They keep going through the same dream. Same thing could be, could be a person, a person has a, whatever, I'm not going to say lack of confidence. That's a bad word. That's not what I'm thinking. Someone has, yeah, I guess in a certain way, a person lacks confidence. So certain things keep coming up that, either remind them of that or remind them of difficulties they went through that somehow they haven't got over, so to speak, can have a negative effect. And not always, by the way, does a person, even if they have these dreams, they remember them. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But a lot of times there may be dreams that, may come over and over and over again. It could be for any number of reasons. Right? Again, one possible reason is, they're feeling, depressed, or they're feeling like, something happened way back when, and it might happen again, or it may, maybe it'll happen again, or something like that. So they go through certain scenarios. I mean, again, it's based on what we previously thought. Right? So there are things that a person's gonna have a dream, and God makes it significant, true. That is very true. I'm not saying it can't happen. Because there are times it does happen. But the vast majority of times, the dreams we have are, just part of our subconscious. Something we ate possibly. But, it's part of our subconscious. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, so significant. Could be. Not going to say not. Could be. But, a lot of times, not going to be the case. We can have nightmares. Nightmares are, I'm not going to say how common they are, right? A person can certainly have nightmares, different things that could happen based on something they saw, based on something they went through. If a person, again, let's make clear, if a person in general would be in control of their thoughts and they're thinking in Torah a lot of the time, right? Vast majority of the time. That's where their thoughts are. Now, it doesn't mean the evil inclination is going to stop here. But if a person is really in tune, they're not going to have these other type of dreams in general. Because the Torah is going to protect him, or her. But, there are things like, a person may think they don't, they're busy preparing for Shabbos, let's say, and whatever, a lot of things happen. They get down to the wire. They have a dream that, they may have a recurring dream that Shabbos came, they weren't ready. And then they realized it was Shabbos and they desecrated Shabbos. Or, maybe, they realized they didn't clean the house for Passover. Like, why would someone have a dream like that? Because they're thinking about all the things they have to do, all the things they have to check and this and that. And, it's part of their psyche. Like, what if I didn't check here? What if I didn't do this? Right? It's part of the psyche. So those things can happen over and over again because certain things are triggered. Right. But I would say in general that Torah should protect us from that. Should. Right. Should be able to protect from that. Someone here points out, trying to keep this clean here, that there's a lot written about a man and sexual behavior. True. Right. In the third paragraph of the Shema, we talk about tzitzit. It says we're not allowed to go after our thoughts. Sorry, after our eyes and after our hearts. Now the question is, who's that talking about? Is it talking about men or is it talking about women? And the answer is it's talking about both. Women also have an evil inclination. Right? When it comes to immorality, a lot of times, it speaks about men. Why? Because, men are on the prowl, so to speak. Right? So if they're on the prowl, and again, we're gonna keep this clean. So a lot of these things have to do with men. Does that mean it never applies to women? I don't think so. Definitely don't think so. Right? But the vast majority of issues are definitely with men. Now, could it affect women? 100%. Because if a woman's in a bad marriage, let's say she's in a difficult marriage, she doesn't feel she's getting the love from her husband, what is she going to do? She's going to look elsewhere. Right? 100%, she's going to look elsewhere. Now, I would have thought many years ago, or I shouldn't say many years ago, a number of years ago, when it comes to divorce, right? Like, what are the top 5 things, that, lead a husband and wife to get divorced? And I was shocked that infidelity was not up there. Right? Maybe it's in the top 10. Wasn't in the top 5. Right? There are many other issues. Right? I was, to me, I was a little bit surprised. But when it comes to women, speaking about women now, when it comes to women, so why would these things happen? I can understand by a guy, just because he's married doesn't mean he doesn't have a desire for any other women. But still, why would a guy act out or a woman act out? Meaning, why would there be infidelity on either side? Because they're not happy in the marriage. Right? There's another issue as well. As the Talmud says, Ma'im genuvim mimtaku. stolen waters are always the sweetest. In other words, if it's something I can't have, then what do? You pursue it. You absolutely pursue it because you can't have it. Then once you have it, it's not as exciting. So marriage can go south if either is not happy in the marriage. And therefore, if they're not happy, and a marriage has to be nurtured, which we mentioned many times. And if it's not, then, if a person's not happy, they'll look elsewhere. That's where infidelity comes in. It's not always that case. But I would say probably the vast majority of cases, it happens where either spouse is not happy in the marriage, or both, let's say, are not happy in the marriage. It can happen almost by accident. I'm not going to say by accident, but they meet somebody, there's infatuation, they'll call it chemistry, whatever, but it's basically lust, right? That's what we're going to call it, and it could happen. It could happen also. Person's not careful, etc. It could happen a number of different ways, right? That being said, also applies to a woman. But the majority of time, why is it mentioned by men? Because it's more common by men. We have a greater evil inclination for that than women. Much more. And also, it's the pursuit, it's the pursuit of the chase. Right? It's running after something that you can't have, but why would a person do it? So I would say a lot of the time, it's because they're not happy in their own marriage. Right? That'd be probably the major reason. That'd probably be the number one reason. But that does not mean by any stretch, women are exempt over here. And we say, no, it doesn't apply to women. It definitely applies to women. But women are different. For a guy, it doesn't really matter. For a woman, it's going to be different over here. So, is there a scripture that gives an example of a woman's behavior? I have to think about that one. Like I said, and if there are fewer examples, by women, it's because it's less common by women than it is by men, right? That would be the reason. Mentioned also when a person's asleep could be, evil spirits, demons could interfere. Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Let me stop taking questions here. Let's go a little bit further. So we said before, by even Ezra, that person has a seminal omission. He didn't have intention, right? He didn't have intention over here. And he has to wash the whole body with water. What does that mean? Right? So it comes on the Balatorim, son of the Rosh. The Balatorim says can have a chatzitza, a barrier between him and the water. Right? That we spoke about before. So explains the Balatorim. Comes along the Rabbeinu B'chai. Now this is where it gets pretty interesting here. Says Rabbeinu B'chai. Rabbeinu B'chai says that you have to wash your whole body. What does it mean over here to wash your whole body? So the Rabbeinu B'chai asks the question. You don't find this by other impure people. You don't find it by a Zav, by a Ziva, anyone who has discharges or any other impurity, that where the Torah says Kol B'sara, his entire body. Doesn't say that anywhere else. We mentioned that before. It only mentioned it by someone who has a seminal omission. Right? Even though by a Zav he says we're much more stringent. The impurity is more stringent. Even though the impurity is more stringent, doesn't mention the entire body. Right? It has to go underwater. Now, why is that? $1 million question. Why is that? Comes on the Rabbeinu B'chai. We're gonna get a little bit into Kabbalah here. A little bit. He says because a person is a hybrid. What are they a hybrid from? They're created from the 4 fundamental elements of creation. Right? What are the four elements of creation? Fire, wind, water, and dirt. Now you're going to say, how does this come up? Okay, let's see. It's different order, whatever, according to the way the world was created. That really wind is first, right? Ruach comes first, then afterwards is water, and afterwards is fire. And that's what we see in the book Sefer Yetzirah, famous book in Kabbalah, attributed to Avram Avinu, that he says the order is wind, water, fire. And these are basic elements of creation. Then he says that wind comes first, right? The ruach comes first. How do I know it comes first before water? Because in the Shemona Esrei, what do we say? We say Mashiva Ruach Umarid Agosha. We say Mashiva Ruach, wind goes, right? And brings down the rain. So what came first? The wind. The wind came first, then the rain. And that's what the Torah says. That fire comes from water. Interesting enough, water from wind. Now, how do I know? Because the Torah tells me, we read 2 weeks ago, beginning of the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 2. It says, when the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the surface of the deep, divine presence hovered upon the surface of the water. Yeah, so what do we see? So you see fire and water, and that the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the water. Spirit, wind, so to speak. Wind. One second. Yeah, you see the wind comes first, then afterwards comes water. And that's what we say in our prayers. Mashiva Ruach Marida Geshem. Or Marida Goshen. Right? The God brings the wind. The wind takes the rain and brings down. The wind comes, takes down the rain. And we see that fire comes from water. Where do you see that? Right? We see that from water comes fire. Right? The Talmud tells us that you have what comes from fire, ashes, and he says that man was created corresponding to the water, even though it was created from the four corners of the earth, the dust of the four corners of the earth. So goes this whole thing. Why we're talking about fire, why we're talking about water. And he says that man, even though we're created from the dust of the four corners of the earth, we're the ones that have the power to overcome it. And that we're able to use these things to our benefit. Because everything in the world comes from these four things. Comes from the wind, comes from water, comes from fire, comes from dust. Right? Those are the four basic elements. So what? So you say, okay, very nice. What does that have to do with anything? So he says, and since that is true, when a person overcomes the spirit, overcomes the wind, so to speak, what is that? That's the wind that invokes in us or awakens in us desire. Right? This wind inside of us awakens our desires from all four aspects of creation. Even though, so So now you're going to say, how does this work? How does this work exactly? Because you'll say, even though all the other fundamental things, water, fire, and earth, dust, whatever you want to call it, when a person sleeps, it's like these things disappear. They totally disappear. In other words, it's like they're dead, these different forces. But there is a force that's not dead. What force is that? He says that's the spirit. That's the wind, so to speak, that is always awake and never sleeps. Right? Never rests, never sleeps. Now, you're going to say, right, okay, so what? Even if it never sleeps. He said, awakens us all these other things that are deep within inside us, all these other forces, and therefore, it awakens all these other forces. Okay, so what does that have to do with this? Comes along the Rabbeinu Bachai, and the Rabbeinu Bachai says, that's why the Torah tells me, somebody has a seminal emission, you got to take water and put it all over your body. Not enough just to immerse, it has to cover your entire body. Why? Because all these four elements, the spirits, fire, water, afar, dust, earth, they're all spread out throughout the body, throughout the flesh, he says, except the one of the wind, of the spirit over here. Because he says that's included in everything. That's included in all these other elements. But all these other elements, when you're asleep, are basically dead. Except the spirit over here. Spirit's not dead, still there. So therefore, what happens? Right? I told you it's going to be mind-boggling. What happens? So when a person has a seminal emission, that seminal emission is not going to cause a woman to get pregnant. No point of having carnal relations for a woman to get pregnant. But you'll say, what if she's, what if she never gets a period? Right? She's not going to get pregnant. So isn't that wasting seed? No. Done the normal way. It's because she can't get pregnant doesn't mean anything. Right? It can be done in the normal way. It's fine. If a woman's pregnant, same thing. She's not going to get pregnant again, right? Normally. So even when she's pregnant, it's permissible. Not wasting seed over here. But what are we saying over here? A person went to sleep. And now the spirit's awoken. Right? He's never asleep. Causes whatever reason this emission to come out. And this emission is not, right? It's not fitting to get anyone pregnant over here. Right? It's not going to happen. Biology 101, 101A. And he says, even though this is not the essence of what, all these other elements, what about all these other elements? Don't they have a say over here? Why are they considered dead over here? Only the spirit that has the only say, because all the other fundamental things, they're asleep. Right? It says they're asleep. They don't have any power. Right? There's only one aspect of these four things, these four fundamental elements that have power. The only one that has power is the spirit himself. Right? The spirit itself. Everything else, no power at all. None. Fire, no power. Water, no power. Dirt, dust, no power. Except this. And that's why it says later in verse 18, which most likely we're not going to get to, it says if a woman sleeps with a man and there's an emission, coma, what is that to say? He says these four fundamental things, they're all in agreement. They all come together. Why do they all come together? They come together because it's what's supposed to be. They're not sleeping over here. They're not dead over here. They're all in agreement because once this thing happens, the emission comes out. They're all in agreement. Nobody's asleep over here. Can't just say, well, it's just spirit. The other ones are asleep. This thing never sleeps. No. We're talking about where it's done in the right way. And he says, therefore, that's why it mentions got to wash in water. But it doesn't say by a woman, it doesn't say by verse 18 that she has to wash her entire body. Why not? Why does she have to wash her entire body over here? Because all these four elements are now working in conjunction. When a person had a seminal emission, it was by himself. Right? It was by this ruach, this spirit, this wind, whatever it was. All the other things, all the other fundamental things in the world that the world's created with, they have no say. They can't do anything. They're dead. Right? They're dead over here. But if a husband's with his wife, and this is a normal thing that happens, then they're all together. They're all in sync over here. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean woman's going to get pregnant, but they're all in sync over here. Right? So by a woman, it doesn't say she has to wash her entire body because they're all in sync. If they're not all in sync, that's what we're talking about. He has to wash his entire body. Right? So what's going on over here? He's telling you there are things going on inside the body in spiritual terms. That there are certain elements that we're made up of that if a man's with a woman, they're all in conjunction. They're all working together. If he's not with a woman and this stuff happens, then those other three parts are really asleep. That one aspect is not asleep. Therefore, he's got to wash his whole body. That's one explanation. He says further, now we mentioned biology 101. A person does this, woman's not going to get pregnant, right? No question about it. But what happens? If it comes out with intention, right, i.e., it's got the power to make a human being. Why? Why? Because all these things are in sync. If all these things are in sync, then he's got the potential to make a living body, right? To create a child. Right? But even so, if that's the case, we don't say, even though that person is impure over here, doesn't say his entire body. He's got to wash. Why? Because this spirit has the potential what's taking everything together. When it takes everything together in the right way, it's got the potential to make a child. Therefore, even though it's going to be impurity, what it means is he doesn't have to wash his full body. But if a person had a seminal emission, even if he didn't have intention, he had no intention we spoke about before, that's considered like the flesh is dead. He had no intention, none whatsoever. So if that's the case, and there was never any intention, that's different. That means the whole body's not in sync. And therefore, he has to cover the entire body. That's why it says the entire body. And that's why it says, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 11 and 12. Yeah, what does it say over there? Again, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 11 and 12. It says, if there be among you a man who will not be clean because of a nocturnal occurrence, right? You go outside the camp, shall not enter the camp in the midst of the camp. Verse 12, when it will be toward evening, he shall immerse himself in the water. When the sun sets, he may enter the midst of the camp. Right? So over there by seminal emission, it says he washes in water. It doesn't say he washes the whole body. Right? It doesn't say that. Right? But he has to wash over here. It doesn't say his entire body over there. It means it washes the water, as explained before. Really means his entire body, even though it doesn't say it. What do we have over here? So this Rabbeinu Bachai is pretty amazing. Rabbeinu Bachai says, when a person sleeps, right? So we understand the soul goes up. Different aspects of the soul. But obviously, the lowest level of the soul, the nefesh, is still there. The nefesh is still there, which attaches the blood, keeps everything together. Otherwise, it's the nefesh of that soul, right? Meaning the animalistic side. If you didn't have that aspect of the soul, when you went to sleep, you're dead. You basically, when you went to sleep, if that part of the soul goes up also, you're no longer in this world. You need that soul. You need that aspect of the soul. That connects to the other spiritual aspects of the soul, but that also connects to the blood and everything else. And if you didn't have that, nothing to talk about. You die. So what do we see? We see there are elements that make up the body, that are elements from the world, that these elements can either be used in sync, they can be used together, they can have the potential to create life, or they're not used in sync, right? In our case, where the Torah says it's not used in sync. So it's not used in sync over here. That's why he has to wash his entire body. Because basically there are other things going on inside the body. Because you can have the main aspect over here, the ruach, this spirit, this wind, if you want to call it, right? That's always awake. Rabbeinu Bachai says. That aspect never sleeps. So when that aspect's awake, in this case, all the other elements, it has power over. All these other elements, they're asleep. They're not aware. They're dead, basically. And if they're dead, so then this has the power. This has the power to create this submission. And that would be a tremendously, seriously thing, even by accidents. Because even by accidents, he doesn't have the ability to create life. Now, let's go a little bit deeper. Why can't he create life over here? Because the four elements are not together, right? The other three elements, water, fire, and dirt, or dust, whatever it is, they're not all acting in conjunction together. If they're not acting in conjunction together, then you can have this problem, this seminal emission. If they're in conjunction together, persons with their spouse, they can create life. Right? So you get all these elements together, they're doing the right thing. Now, even if they don't create life, for whatever reason, then we still hold that is not called wasting seed over here. Just like if a woman was pregnant and they had relations, so it's not a problem over here. Why? She's not going to get pregnant again. So you might think, okay, so if that's the case, you can't be together till after she gives birth. That's not true. Right? And let's say it'd be dangerous for a woman to get pregnant, either psychologically or physically. Either way, where it's permissible to use contraception. So even if it would be permissible in that case, what are we going to say? Person may say, well, that's wasting seed. Well, a woman, in this case, it's a danger. Right? It's a danger, whatever it is. Right? It's considered a danger. If it's a danger, then there's nothing wrong over here. There's nothing wrong. Right? It's not considered wasting seed. But, one thing I think we see clear, and that is that even in the complex human body, we need everything to be in sync in spiritual terms, not just physical terms. Or physical terms also. Right? It could be, you can have all the spiritual things ready, but there could be other issues. But even so, we're going to make it very, very easy. If all the spiritual things are in sync, then that has the power to bring life. If they're not in sync and this happens, that means you're wasting life here. You're wasting the potential to create life. The purpose of being together, husband and a wife, is to create life, is to have children. Even by non-Jews, there's an obligation to have children. What's the reason? Because if they didn't have children, the world wouldn't be populated. We need the world to be populated. But they could have children every 5 years, every 10 years, right? Doesn't matter. They don't have the same obligations Jews have, but there's an obligation to populate the world. And if a person didn't do it, okay, it's a mitzvah they didn't do. There's some people who never got married. Some people never had kids. I know someone told me a while ago that, is that considered being selfish? A woman says, I didn't want to have kids. Never wanted to have kids. Now, a woman doesn't have an obligation to have kids. It's only on the guy, right? But even on the guy, you can't do it without a woman, right? Biology 101B, right? So you need a woman. So she gets part of the mitzvah, but she doesn't have the obligation, right? He's got the obligation. Now you say, how far does it go? How far does that obligation go? So for a Jew, try to have a boy and a girl. If he had a boy and a girl, he fulfills his obligation. But every other child he has, obviously, is a mitzvah. Now, we're not going to say it's so easy. Raising big families, no question, different things. But, if a person didn't do it, I had someone ask me this a while ago, many years ago, right? His second marriage, his wife couldn't have children, and he desperately wanted to have children. So, basically, I said, if you're happily married, it's not something you get divorced. He said, but I really want to have kids. I said, you're not going to have natural kids, right? You want to be with someone else, you get divorced, right? But I said, Kaufman's line of logic is, you don't get divorced if you don't have to, right? If there are other things going on, okay. If not, then there's no reason to get divorced. You didn't have kids. You yourself, this man did not have children. Okay? He didn't have children. And what if he didn't eat matzah on Passover? What if he didn't put on tefillin? There are mitzvahs he didn't do. He didn't do it. Right? So if he didn't do it, he didn't do it. But, there is a big thing that even, let's say, a husband loses a spouse, they get divorced, they get remarried, they try and have kids. Right, try and bring more kids into the world. Now again, it depends on a lot of different factors, but this is a general rule. So, even by non-Jews, which they'd be kind of shocked. But most non-Jews want to have kids. Maybe a couple, maybe one. They want to have some sort of remembrance in the world. But it's not enough. They have to populate the world. Because if you don't have a next generation, if you don't have a next generation, that's it. So, you're not gonna, the world won't survive. You won't have enough people to have the next generation. Not gonna happen, right? 100%, it's not gonna happen over here, right? So the obligation, person can do what they can. Now, someone will say, well, I had kids. I was married. I have no interest in getting remarried. The Gemara says, by a woman, it's better for her to be married than not be married. Certainly for a guy, right? Save him from bad thoughts and another thing. But we're not saying to get married just for the sake of getting married, right? Some people, it might be better if they don't get married. Okay, right? But in general, there's a mitzvah to be married and have children. Is that going to stop someone from converting? Someone told me this a while ago. They said, well, if you don't have so many kids or whatever, you can't get, you can't convert. I don't know who said that. I don't know why it was said, per se. But 100%, as the English would say, rubbish. It's rubbish. Not true. It's like, I had a student in, a certain group on Facebook, and they told them, if you don't kiss the Israeli flag, you can't convert. You want to be Israeli? Fine. You love Israel? Great. You can convert. If not, you don't know how to convert. It's also rubbish. What does that have to do with conversion? Zero. Doesn't show anything. What? You have to be a Zionist to convert? Who says? Doesn't say in my book. I know any commentators bring that down. But, it is a pretty serious thing. That doesn't mean, for a woman, I had this question that didn't come to fruition, but a woman was interested in conversion, had children, from somebody, and whatever, she had her tubes tied, basically. She didn't want to have any other kids. And the question was, if she meets somebody who wants to have children, does she have to undo it? And the answer was no. All right, I asked my Rebbe this question. He said she doesn't have to. Right? It's not her obligation. Right? And she should make clear. She doesn't want to have kids. She's dating somebody, that she should make clear. She's not going to have any more kids. And that's it. If this person wants kids, marry someone else. You find someone else. Not her obligation. If she didn't have kids, maybe a different issue. But again, the obligation isn't on her. Right? It's really on the guy. Right? Definitely really on the guy over here. So here, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is, if I do something wrong, it means my spiritual side is not in sync. Right? And you basically wasted seed over here, but it wasn't on purpose. Okay, but that I have to my entire body has to be washed. Right? No, no barriers in the mikvah. If, it's normal relations, even if a child is not created, it doesn't matter. That's all the potential. Right? All the potential when the body and soul are in sync. That's the potential for life. If the body and soul, or let's say better, the aspects of the soul are not in sync, other things are going to happen. Yeah, so I flushed this out because A, it's something I think it's kind of wild, right? But B, it gives a little bit of insight. And it gives a little bit of insight, to what's really going on. Because, a person will say, oh, it's all mumbo jumbo, it's all this, it's all that, whatever. And they'll say, wow, that's so deep, like sound like a crackpot. But think about it. Think about what's going on. What happens when a person sleeps. So in general, where are our thoughts, our dreams going to come from? Pretty much what we thought about during the day. But there are other deeper things that Rabbeinu Bachai says. I mean, he's quoting from Sefer Yetzirah. It's a Kabbalistic book. It's a book on Kabbalah attributed to Abraham. Right? There's very deep stuff over here. Right? I didn't bring it out so I could confuse everyone, show how much I know or I don't know. Right? I wanted to show over here, what's going on. Now, the body could be in sync in many different ways. And everything works, and a woman doesn't get pregnant. Now, it could be something on her end, it could be something on his end, right? But in the end, there could be spiritual things going on here as well. Right? But even so, when all the elements are together, and there's what we call achdus, there's togetherness over here, they're all working in sync. That's the potential for life. When they're not working in sync, and a person does this, even by accident, it shows they're not in sync. Some aspects of the soul, right? The main elements of the world, crushed, demolished, dead, in my language. Right? It's really the language of the Rabbeinu Bachai. They're dead. They have no function here. So the spirit has all the power, and this is what's going on. But if they're in sync, and if all these things work together, that has the potential to create life. The other way doesn't have potential to create life. Right? And that's why it's so bad. Right? That's why wasting seed is so bad. Because that has all the power to create life. We're not talking about where you put in some sperm bank and someone else is going to use it, whatever. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a person wasting seed in general. Right? A lot of things to be spoken about, and other people have spoken about much more than me. Right? But the point is, it's got the potential for life. Even if life is not going to be created at this point. Right? A wife can't get pregnant. Dangerous for her to get pregnant. Okay, but it's got the potential to create life. The other way, there is no potential to create life. You're wasting what could be potential life. That's why it's so severe. And most people think, oh, it's not so bad. It's this, it's whatever. Right? We're not gonna get gross here. We're gonna keep this clean. Right? But at the same time, some people say there's nothing wrong with it. Other people think it's gross. Right? But according to the Torah, what's the problem? The Torah says forbidden. The Torah says 100% is forbidden, death penalty. Right? See, by Aaron Onan, they weren't Jews. It should apply to non-Jews also. But even so, it's potential for life. It's destroying life over here. Potential life. So who says you have the right to do that? Oh, but you did it by accident. You know why you did it by accident? This is the kicker, which we already said. Why? Why is it so bad? Because the soul is not in sync over here. If the soul's not in sync, it's never going to create life. And the whole point of being together is to create life. Right? Unless, for whatever reason, a woman can't get pregnant or it's dangerous for her to get pregnant, whatever the case is. But the whole point is to create life. So why are you wasting life over here? Potential life. Release stress, other things, whatever. Right? Again, we're not going to get gross here. The point is the soul is not in sync. And if the soul's not in sync, you're destroying life. That's why it's so severe. One of the reasons why it's so severe. But once the soul is in sync, this is wild. Once the entire soul is in sync, right, and everything's working together, all things being equal, that's the potential to create life. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Someone asks, I'll take questions there. Someone asks, can you apply this to health? 4 forces are not in balance. Could you have health problems? Here we're talking about something very specific. I don't know if it has to do with other health problems. It is brought down that, there are certain organs that correspond to certain things. And if a person's not using them the right way, they could be infected or even worse. So if the soul is in sync, then in theory, a person should never get any sickness from any major organs, right? Especially the reproductive organ. Nothing should happen. Why? Because the soul's in sync, over here. Here he's talking about that specifically. It could apply to other things, right? It could have, now, in other words, there are certain organs, let's say the kidneys, the liver, different things that they represent. If a person doesn't uphold them and use them the right way, could it be problematic 100%? Could they get affected in a negative way? Could they become sick? Yeah. It certainly could happen. But here he's talking about, this aspect. I would say that if a person is in tune spiritually, that would mean emotionally and everything else, they should be in tune also. So you say, well, what if a person has mental illness? So mental illness, yeah, the body's out of whack, the soul's out of whack. 100%. But again, that could happen because something else happens that's traumatic. And that can affect other things. So even if you would say, well, up until that point, my soul was really intact. My body was really intact, at that point. And then something happens, everything is thrown off. Right? It doesn't mean the person can't keep Torah and keep mitzvahs. It's going to be a lot more difficult in other ways. Right? But still, they have the ability to overcome to a certain extent. But if all things being equal, if the soul's intact, the body should be intact. Right? They go hand in hand. The reason the body's sick is because there's a spiritual illness as well. We don't see how it necessarily manifests itself, but that's what the Bali Musar speak about it. that for the body to be whole and to be intact, yeah, you have to eat right, you have to exercise, all these things, but the soul has to be right also. The soul has to be going in the right way. If the soul's not going in the right way, what are the chances the body's going to be going in the right way? Very slim, right? Very, very slim. Let me see if there's any, 1 second. Someone asks, if you couldn't complete the Torah portion the previous week, can you continue the same portion the following week? Yeah, you should finish it before starting the next Torah portion. Well, you should try and finish it. It applies to men, doesn't apply to women. Right? Women can just start, if they want to, they can start the next portion if they didn't finish. Better to finish, but if you don't have time, not an issue. It apply to men more, not to women. How do you prevent the tablecloth becoming a bosses? Being something, let's say you have something on the tablecloth on Shabbos that, let's say you had candles. You had candles after they're lit. Let's say after they go out, the candles are on. They have something underneath it to catch the wicks or catch any fire comes out of it, whatever. So that thing, I'm not allowed to move. After the menorah's already gone out, I'm not allowed to move the tray underneath. Why not? It's a bosses. It's called a base for something that is forbidden. What's forbidden? The menorah. Once the menorah is lit, I can't move it. Once the menorah goes out, I'm also not allowed to move it unless before Shabbos I put something on this tray that's permissible for me to move. I.e. challah, right? For a woman, could be a ring, something that I need to use that's permissible. That would not make it a bus, right? But if you had something, let's say you didn't have the table. Let's say you didn't have the menorah on the table. Let's say. So now I have something. Let's say I have something that is muk. So let's say I have chicken bones on the table. I want to take them off. I'm allowed to take them off. Does not make the tablecloth into a bus. Doesn't make it into a base of something that's forbidden. Only when it was there before Shabbos. In the case of my candles, right? That would make that would be forbidden me to move not only the tablecloth, the entire table. Unless I need the space. If I need the space, I can move the table. Yeah, I'm allowed to move it. But I'm not allowed to move the menorah. I'm not allowed to move the tablecloth. The tablecloth I can't move over here, right? Unless I had something on the tray. If I had challah on the tray or something permissible on the tray, then I'm going to use during Shabbos. I'm allowed to move that menorah with the tray, right? That'll be allowed to do. Tablecloth in general doesn't necessarily become a buses. It doesn't necessarily become a base over here for something that's forbidden all of Shabbos, unless it was there really before Shabbos, right? But even so, let's say I had a hammer, and I'm cracking walnuts because I don't have a nut cracker. And I use a hammer to crack walnuts, and I put the hammer on the table. Does the table become a buses for the hammer? No. Why not? Because if I need the space where the hammer is, which most likely is the case, I'm allowed to move it. 100% I'm allowed to move it because I need the space, right? If it's something I need the space, doesn't necessarily become a buses, right? But if something was placed on the tablecloth before Shabbos and it's something 100% forbidden, let's say like my menorah, yeah, then I got a problem. Then I got a problem unless I put something permissible on it, right? But even if I need the space, I'm not allowed to move it in that case on the tablecloth. Right? If it's a case where my hammer is used for something permissible, not necessarily something forbidden, even though a lot of times I'm going to use a hammer to hammer nails. But still, I'm allowed to move it if I need the space. That's what I would say. If a person didn't say Ashrei 2 times during the morning prayer, can you say it twice in the afternoon prayer? No. If you didn't say it, you didn't say it. I wouldn't say you should say it twice. All right, someone who says Ashrei 3 times is going to merit the redemption. Yeah, but I don't think that means if you didn't say it, you say it anyway. I mean, I have to double check that, but I don't think it's a good thing to say it more than once. Right? If you didn't say it, you didn't say it. If it's, you don't make it up in the afternoon service by saying it twice. Right? That's what I would say, but I have to double check that. Any other questions? All right, I think I'm gonna stop there. I do this every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone that has any questions, find me on Facebook. You can text me if you're on Orthodox conversion to Judaism. You can also text me at Michael Chaim Kaufman, my new place up there, or you can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBIChaimCoffman @gmail.com. Wishing everyone a good end of the day, beginning of the day, middle